That's looking perfect. I already got my friend Roseanne here, overachiever here a little bit early. Perfect. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, all right. Very good. Just double checking. Looks like YouTube's working for us tonight. Yeah, just getting my everything set up here. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Super excited. Last night we had a blast.
I can't hear you.
What? Can you hear me, Roseanne?
There we go.
All right, good. We got Roseanne hearing us, so hello. We are going to give everybody just a couple minutes here to get started. We're here a little early. I'll definitely be taking those, all the questions, and I see the blue blocker ones. So I will definitely talk about blue blockers because we had a blast with those last night. So just give us a couple minutes. Welcome everybody. As we did last night, we're going to kind of hang out for a few, just say hello. Hi, Lindsay there from California. Thanks for joining us. Usually we'll try to get started just a little bit after 8 o'clock here. Give people a few moments to join us. And as we get going, it gives me an opportunity to get my chat windows up so I can see everybody and what's going on. So many people here. Thanks for joining us. Really excited. Oh, so much stuff going on in the world, and I'm so glad. I'm just so grateful that we're able to chat. Oh, we got Amy from Columbus. 5G. All right, we'll have to talk about that. Yeah, and SoCal. Greetings from LA. Hi, Brian Brandy from Wyoming. Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining us. Like I said, I'm just going to give a couple moments here before we get started. See if we have any.
Hey Tom, there's a question. Yeah. Somebody wants to know that if they registered today, will they get yesterday's webinar as well? Good.
They will, and I'm going to go over all of that in just a moment.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we will definitely hit that. Let's see here, just. All right.
Can you hear me now? Hey.
Oh, I got everybody.
Are we live right now?
Right.
Oh, hey. So there.
We are.
Hi, Roseanne.
Hey, we're all jumping on early today. So, all right.
Who's Camper?
So I'm gonna meet you guys. Camper is our tech guy for the night. So I'm gonna put you guys on mute for a minute while we get started, then bring you guys back in. I think we'll see if I can do this right. All right, let's see. Oh, everybody's got it. All right, everybody, let's get going. Thanks for all the hellos in the chat. Please let us know who's here and where you're coming from. I know we have a couple of questions. So to start off, I'm Dr. Tom Moorcroft, super excited to and so grateful that you're here and all the experts are joining us for this event. And, you know, last night we had a great chat about the importance of our healthy eating options and how to get into the kitchen with our kids and ourselves and have a really great time. We had Cynthia Thurlow here along with Dr. Terry Walls and Katie Kimball. So super great discussion. And one of the questions that we had already was just like, hey, if I registered today, will I be able to get the replay from yesterday? And absolutely you will. What's going to happen is we're going to do tonight and tomorrow night and a little bit, you know, a couple days will go by. My team will get it all together. We'll send you out an email with not only a link for the replays from last night, tonight, and tomorrow, but you'll also be able to get yourself a bunch of free resources from our different guests. And on the registration page at originsofhealth.com/coronavirus-mini-series, you can even download there's a free module from Katie Kimball's program about how to teach knife skills safely to our kids. So that was super cool. So anyhow, so tonight we're going to be focusing on a lot of the challenges that we're anticipating home as this pandemic sort of evolves, specifically how to guide our children through this time. And I know that my daughter's home with us. We're really trying our best to have a good supportive time together, but it is difficult at times, and it's like, we're used to having a little bit of space. She's used to decompressing at school. So we've brought together experts. Dr. Rosen Hodge is a integrative and holistic child psychologist who's going to help talk to us about how to talk to children, what she's hearing in her practice. Also, Nicole Perkins is also a doctor who is a clinical psychologist, a holistic psychologist, and she's going to talk to us very specifically about what if we have executive function issues? What if we have focus issues that are pre-existing in our kids or even in ourselves, and how can we sort of work with that while we're in this new home environment? And then, as we saw pop in with us, we have the amazing Dr. Elisa Song. Not only is she the best holistic pediatrician that I've ever known, but she's also a mama, and she's got some really incredible stories from home with COVID-19 and really how it hits at home and what we can do personally to get over this. So I would love to get us started tonight. One other question, so I don't forget. We had a blast with this last night, talking about wearing blue blockers, because Cynthia was wearing hers and I put these on, and then we also have kind of these here for later on to keep our melatonin cycle really good. And so all these lights we're using aren't really going to blow us out. And so I use two different kinds. Some of the lighter ones I use are Gunnar, Gunnar, and then also Dave Asprey has his, I think it's like True Light or something like that. And that's what these are, as well as these that you'll see a little later on. So yeah, and I will do my best to remember to throw that in the resource section. So when you get the replay information, you'll get the blue blocker piece. So I'm going to go over here. Let's see, Roseanne, I'm going to turn you back on here. And get you in here. I'd love to introduce, I'm super excited to bring on my friend, Dr. Rosen Hodge. She's an expert in children's mental health and integrative therapies. She is a co-author of a book called Brain Under Attack, and it's a resource guide for parents who have children with autoimmune encephalitis, often known as Pandas and Pans. She's helped a gazillion, she says thousands, I just call them a gazillion kids and young adults with learning disabilities, post-concussive syndrome, ADHD, Lyme disease, and other issues stemming from PANS and Pandas and all sorts of other stuff. She's really amazing. Like, she's got my back, and it is so amazing to just have a friend who is just 100,000% dedicated to the kids. So, Roseanne, I'm super excited to have you here. How's things going?
Well, thank you for that awesome intro. I love you back. So thank you. Dr. Chang and I do killer collaborations. So we always have a good time too, no matter what is going on, and we try to give a lot of love. So, what's going on is, obviously we're all in quarantine, and just a lot of questions about everything related to parenting and structuring home learning and structuring their own work, and just a lot of tangles that keep getting, there's more and more tangles. But on the flip side, I'm also hearing a lot of really awesome things that families and parents are doing. So, they're kind of embracing this time in some ways the best they can.
Yeah, I really want to start with what's going on at home, because I think one of the things that's really so cool about everybody who's joining us this week is, we're family members, we're moms, we're dads, we have kids, we have parents. And I think that there's no better way to know how to get through this. And we're all healthcare professionals, right? We give all this information to people. This is how you should do it. But what about, what's it like in reality? So what's the reality at your house? And then we can talk about how to help other people.
Let's talk about the reality right now, that I'm at home instead of work, and I had to go to my teenager, go to my 9-year-old, go to my husband, and let them know that I was going to be live. And this isn't abnormal for them per se, but I of course set the room up, and the cat tried to just break in. So And I'm sharing this with you because I want you all to chuckle. Who else is experiencing this right now? So the reality is we're all trying to get through this together, and it's not always easy, right? So, we have to be mindful. We have to think about what do we need. So, with today, before I left this morning, I was like, I'll be back at this time and let people know. And why did I do that? Communication is really important. So I think these are new times of communication. We're used to living very structured lives, and we don't feel like we have structure, but that you can always put structure in your life, and I really encourage that. So, right now, like I said, this is a little different that I would be doing this at 8 o'clock. Normally, I would just stay at the office till whatever time it was done because, I like it.
Right.
I like that structure, but things are a little different, and that's okay. You have to go with it. You have to forgive yourself. Parents are feeling guilty. Like I had a mom, we're doing a Facebook group for parents right now called the Chill Challenge. And I had a mom message me and tell me she was feeling guilty that her kids are doing more screen time than normal. And so, right. So let's talk about that, right? Because I think that's one of the things people are feeling bad for. First of all, if you're a provider and you need your job, you're going to do what you got to do to get through it.
Right. I mean, this is a conversation Jill and I had today. It was just like our daughter's home and her school's been really good, but they need some self-directed learning time as well as the time where they're with the teacher virtually. But like this week, they're on vacation, but we're not on vacation. So yeah, and she's getting a little more screen time than maybe we would like. But I think this is a theme we talked about last night with food and exercise and family. And I love that you brought it up right away is we need to cut ourselves a little bit of a break and be flexible in this time.
Yeah. And it all starts with communication. So whatever your expectations are, you need to be clear as a parent with your kids. And you can't just say, just like the person, we have somebody in our house, my nephew, who will walk past garbage and doesn't see it. Got to be one of the best kids in the whole planet.
Right.
He doesn't see it. But if I ask him to do it, he'd be like, of course. And he's so fantastic. So I always use this extreme examples because we want to really think about we're all together and we're going to get on each other's nerves. We are. This is what it is. So laying out what you expect realistically, and then negotiating, particularly with older kids, negotiating with them, but just being really clear cut. Like, so, outside of my door at work, it's like, you can't knock on this door. I said to my little guy who's been coming to work and doing homeschooling at work through Zoom, and I put a little thing on the door that said, if you need me, this is your alternative, right? How much more clear cut? And he's the kind of kid that can be self-directed and do that. And I think it just prevents a lot of stress on the parent who's like, oh my gosh, I'm on this call with my boss. Right. What do I do? Being really clear is helpful, and practicing, like we said, Tom, some forgiveness. Like, so, Talia had she caught a couple extra movies last week, so here's some it happens. So here's some creative things that people are doing, like have a movie, then say, like, try to watch, there's lists of educational movies, movies that have a theme, then say afterwards, I'm going to talk to you about like the challenges the character had. If you're really that concerned about whether the movie is going to, ruin them because, they got an extra 10 hours of screen time that week, I'm going to tell you they're going to be okay. But you also can do alternative things, right? So like every museum is online. You want to negotiate in advance and say, well, before you get onto Minecraft, you need to do X, Y, and Z, right? We don't pay our employees before they do the work. It's the same thing with our kids. It's just, we need to be a little more flexible during this time, right, Tom?
And I think that the clarity too, I agree with the flexibility, but the clarity, I mean, it's something that is so important, is you lay out the expectation ahead of time and you have some flexibility. And 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 I think that one of the things as parents is we have such a great influence over our kids. When we're doing all of this, we also, you're going to also need to be able to say, this is what I'm doing, and I also need some flexibility too, And if you're asking for flexibility, give them a little bit of flexibility. Like with Talia, they had what the heck is it called? One of the local historical places, they're doing this big project now. And so she got her whole school involved because she's really into it. And so now as part of school, she's been working on this project with them. And I think it's just really awesome for them to be able to take ownership. And another example that I gave the last time we did one of these chats together was, Talia watched Shark Tank, right? Because I'm like, we fast forward through it. So it's like 42 minutes. But then I said, okay, she watched one and got excited because somebody had created this like online where you get your own designer, after you fill out some questions. So I said, okay, here's your project. You can have extra screen time, but now you have to go figure out, is that more cost effective than if you had to hire somebody and then pick out the clothes yourself? And she did a whole project around it. So we got kind of creative. So I really love that flexibility and creativity.
And here's the thing, what you need to do with a kid is just like what a teacher would do, is that you show them something, right? I'm a big fan. I don't think we talked about this last time. I'm a big fan of something called lap books. So I'm a former homeschooler, so I know all about this stuff. You can Google lap books. And basically they do research on a topic. You ask your kid, like, what do you want to do a topic on? Okay, you want to do it on space, right? Or space exploration or something really specific. We can do this really with any age. We do this with our vacations. Because the Hodges like to take off previously.
Right.
Go off on vacations out of school time. So we would do lap books in this place. And they go real deep into a topic. They, every possible thing, and they put it in this lap book, and it's really pretty cool. So as a teacher, you set a child up, you show them what to do, and then you let them go, right? So, and so I love that you did that with Talia. She got inspired by her school, and, this is beneficial for the kids. We want to really be mindful that pretty much every school is not going back until September. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. New York State is, I think, the first state to say that. And, so we want to make sure we're not having regression, and that means being active. And, what kids need to do is reading, writing, and math. For your younger kids, your older kids need to think about what they need to do for the next year. And this comes through conversation, like letting your kids know. Obviously, when your kid has special needs, there's questions about pans and pandas. When I think about my own child with pans and pandas, here's the good news about quarantine. We're not bringing anything home to him, and he's much less likely to get sick. So, but we always, as all of us PANS moms are talking about in the threads, is that we always are worried about getting sick. This quarantine component, yes, it's something different, but it is a worry that we always have, whether, whatever infectious disease is impacting the nervous system. But, in terms of parenting, you have to be flexible, you have to communicate, set up in advance, and you have to be present, right? So I think the other thing that I'm really hearing about is that we're all getting, contacted constantly through our phones, and everyone wants to have a
Oh my
Zoom
God.
meeting. It's like, I've never worked more. I mean, I work all the time, but this is really pretty intense. So people are like, do you have a minute to talk? And I'm like, I really don't.
Isn't it crazy how busy you get? And I find myself saying, Talia, I'll be with you in a minute, or I'll be with you in an hour. And I think one of the tricks is I'm very clear on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But then I also have to say, whoa, enough is enough. This is family time. So I think routine is really a big deal in here.
Critical. And you need to have a schedule. I've been screaming this since February on TV, but you need to have a schedule, and you have to stick to it, and you got to get up and move around. So I, have been doing whatever I can. I'm somebody who's pretty religious with working out, as I know Dr. Tom is, and our kids need movement. So even though they're in classes and sitting, they are moving, they're able to get up. And so you really want to encourage that and not have them on their downtime, grab their device right away. But again, if that's what you need to do because you have to work a 9-to-5 job, that's okay. The best way to handle that is to talk about it in advance. You know, right. What your rules are really important. You know, this is going to be very interesting educationally, Tom, because we just don't know what's going to happen. You know, there's no exams, there's no benchmarks. You know, kids can regress educationally as quickly as 2 weeks. You know, so there's a lot of worries, you know, that are somewhat legitimate. But I also want to tell parents that what's important is that, you know, as little as 1 to 2 hours of direct instruction a day is what 6 hours of learning is at school.
Well, right. And I think we're so used to like our model of learning. Whereas if you look at other countries, like say Japan is a great one. I mean, they have so few topics, but they let their kids learn it in all different areas. So, you know, one of the things you're talking about is movement too. And I think it's so important because we were talking last night with Dr. Terry Walls. Actually, all of us were talking about it, but really Terry brought up like not only the food choices, but we have to move. We had this really nice discussion of the lymphatic drainage and keeping ourselves healthy by daily movement. But I remember Brandon Bouchard, who is a high performance coach. He's like kind of at the, you know, sort of on the level of Tony Robbins. He's like every hour you have to take well, I should say his research actually shows at least every 50 minutes, you have to stop and take a break and move around and change up. It could only be for a couple of minutes. And so what I mean, so we have to we can teach our kids now how to become high performers doing that.
Yeah, so, and actually it's children every 20 to 30 minutes is what they need to move. I mean, some kids I really encourage, you know, we all are different learners, so you really want to respect what your kid is telling you and showing you how they learn best. So, you know, physically standing up at the table, I have my computer typically on our kitchen counter, which has a second layer, and I can just stand when I'm there. I also, of course, have an exercise bike desk. So
nice. Yeah, I have to stand.
I highly encourage it. And you know, my kids get on there and do that. But yes, you need to move. And people are asking, you know, about what's the ratio of instruction. So 1 to 2 hours of one-to-one instruction equals 6 hours of instruction a day.
Yeah.
So pretty incredible. But that 1 to 2 hours can be really jam-packed. You know, again, they're not used to that intensity, and kids can really get through things. Kids with attentional issues that may be longer because they need more breaks in between. You know, they're asking about Pandas kids. Every Pandas kid is
that's where I want to go.
Right.
So
you know?
Yeah, and I say thank you all for your questions, and thank you for Dr. Elisa Song, who's chiming in and helping us with some of this. It's so great to get questions and keeping the conversation going too. But a couple of questions, because I know we're gonna dive in this later, especially with Elisa, with PANS and PANDAS, because I think that's a big question. But you know, you and I, we do a lot of work with PANS kids together, and some, you know, what are you feeling like with your PANS and PANS kids? What are you seeing in currently in terms of like how serious is the virus for them? What is their experience? And sort of, you know, there's a question about, you know, as far as the overactive immune reaction, because you know me, I've got a couple of opinions, but I love to hear what your experience is.
I think what my PANS family felt first. So, oh, I'm sorry, somebody's in a flare.
I know,
so a flare is a worsening of the behaviors, the physical symptoms, everything all at once. And it could be brought on by another illness, stress, a lot of different things. As my friend from Gabriella True says, the wind blowing can bring on a flare for a pair of kids. So I'm really a flare, a PANS mom. So what do I want to say? I think initially everybody was so worried about their kids actually getting it. Social distancing is working. Mm-hmm. So I think that is great. And so there has been a lessening of fears. I think what people are realizing is for their kids, so many kids with PANS are at home, and already we're getting homebound instruction, or homeschooling, and homebound instruction is when a school system pays for it. And homeschooling is when a parent takes that on. So for people that already had a regular routine, I don't know how much they're noticing a difference, except sometimes the family dynamics could be causing an interference and throwing in the flares. Also, people may not be able to get access to the treatments that they normally
get.
I
think that's what Sharon's saying, is their son's not able to get his IVIG, and I've had a lot of that. Now, I really love, Elisa made a comment, taking care of our kids' minds and mental health is, in her opinion and mine, the most important way to keep their immune systems healthy and strong. And, I think that we need to model that behavior. And I think that that's why I really wanted to start off like, this whole evening with this mental health discussion, because it really is. I mean, it's body, mind, and spirit. And I mean, what about leading here? Because I mean, like, a lot of kids, like I've talked to a lot of people who have teenagers, and their teenagers are kind of like, and now we're all in the same house. So, I mean, what are you recommending to parents who, when their kids really aren't into it, but how do they keep leading in this time so that we can help their mental health without choking them?
So first of all, I want to say very pleasantly that I know that out there are kids that are like hands up, teenagers are breaking curfews, they're going out, they're connecting with their friends when they're not supposed to, that's why a lot of playgrounds are showing up. But on the flip side, what I'm hearing from a lot of my parents is that they're surprised how willing their teens are able to do things. And, so many of my kids with special needs, including Pans and Pandas, they're so used to getting support. And when we teach them to connect to their body, to really get in their body, which nobody who's anxious or angry wants to, but when you teach them that, they are much more able to understand what works for them. So they are more likely to say, I need this. I joke around, I have all these tools at home, right? We have biofeedback, we have PMF, we have neurofeedback. And my kids are like, hey, I need a little BRT tonight, which is PMF and biofeedback. They know that. So creating the routine, modeling it, but Elisa's right. It all starts with the mind and regulating the nervous system. Mind, body, and spirit are all connected.
Right.
They are. And so what you can do is to try to support the nervous system. And you can do that at home with tools like breath work. You can Google 5-7-8 breath or 360 breathing. There's all different types of breath work. And it's teaching you to breathe through your belly, right? I don't know if any of you, I felt the other day that I noticed for the first time in I don't know how long that I felt myself breathing in my chest. And I was like, I don't breathe in my chest. I'm Dr. Rosen, for crying out loud.
That's right.
So I just was like, I need to do my breath work. I'm not doing it. And it was because I was hunched over a computer and doing all this work and my body got out of whack. And it was really affecting me. I was feeling not like myself, waking up in the middle of the night, not always laughing even at my own jokes. Just kidding. But, just felt out of whack. So start with breath work, meditation. You can do heart math, using the blue blocker glasses. All these tools that are designed to regulate your nervous system will help with flares. I mean, that's what I do. I help kids who are struggling by regulating the nervous system, and parents
we had a really cool question. Somebody asked about they've all been isolated for a month, but their 5-year-old with autism and Pandas flared up. So, but nobody's sick. So there's a little question about seasonal allergies, which could certainly kick it off. But you mentioned something I want you to kind of round out our conversation with is, because part of the rest of the question is, are we worried the virus came in on some groceries, which honestly, I think is way overblown. I mean, I think that we're exposed to the virus most of the time through respiratory droplets. There might be some others, but getting it on our food, we can have that conversation another time. But you mentioned the word stress. What types of stressors and how does stress play a role in PANS flares, or even just a kid who's neurotypical A-OK before all this COVID-19?
It's not even kids, it's all of us. So, I always give the example of, this is our nervous system and this this is the base, right? The baseline, we're supposed to idle here. But anybody who is activated, who's stressed, who's depressed, their nervous system starts getting into a red high state, okay? And once you're in a higher state, you actually just start responding to everything outside of your control. And when you go offline, it's fight, flight, or freeze. And the basis of this is, you know, we have this nervous system that has a sympathetic state and a parasympathetic state. And once we get into the sympathetic dominant, we get so reactive, right? But there's awesome news. You absolutely can walk this down. I use clinical tools like neurofeedback and biofeedback, things like that. But everybody can do breath work. Everybody can do meditation. You can buy an inexpensive heart math unit. There's lots of other tools. You can do guided visualization, and you can help walk it down. Somebody had an awesome question. How do you get a kid to get back in their body when they don't want it? Right. And it's very protective. People want to flee. They have this uncomfortable feeling. And so for those of you that have anxious kids or even anxious yourself, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You want to survive. You don't want to feel the uncomfortableness. So the best way to do it is actually to, you know, sit on the ground with them. And, you know, you always want to be grounded so they get a base. And practice breath. Start with putting your hand over your heart, do the 5, 7, 8 breath, teach them belly breathing, and then say things like, where do you notice? You know, put your hand where you notice the uncomfortableness. And when you do that, they make this connection because they're so disconnected. You will never, as a child, as an adult, move through these things is if you don't connect to the uncomfortableness. If you try to avoid it, all you do is shove it down. But when you actually connect to it, you're able to be alert to it and avoid it, right? So what are actual stressors for our PNs, kids, or anybody else? Us all being two together might be too stressful. Maybe you're eating junk food. I don't know. You know, there's so many things. Maybe there's one person in your family who's really distressed right now and not holding it together. And this is causing some of those flaring things to go on. You know, it could be hormone dysregulation. There's just so many parts to why somebody flares or doesn't. They may be grinding their teeth, and that's creating a cranial issue for them. I mean, you know, there's so many little pieces. That's why having as much as you can and practicing as much self-love as you can for yourself as a parent, and really doing these things as proactively as possible supports the whole family's mental health. You know, and letting, you know, your kids, when they're in fight, flight, or freeze, they're not in control. You know, don't try to talk to them then, talk to them after. And, you know, these kind of kids need a lot of loving limits and, you know, as much hug as you can. So it's a 5, 7, 8 breath is what I like because it's super easy. So in for 5, hold for 7, out for 8. You do it at least 3 times. Or there's another type of breath called 360 breathing. You can go to my Facebook page. You'll see me talking about a 5, 7, 8.
So, yeah, and so I'm going to give you some homework if you don't mind, because I know you just said it to everybody. And if you don't mind, maybe you can give me a couple resources and some links to the articles and, you know, your Facebook page and stuff, so that when we send out the replay, we'll be able to I want to make sure we give everybody those things, and so we can give them links to heart math. But, you know, all those breathing techniques would be really great.
I will put that all in there. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is really important as we wrap up, because I know we have so many things to do tonight. It's like, and you and I could talk forever. But the one thing that Roseanne is talking about with the heart math, you can start at home for free by breathing into your chest, right? So you just basically start to breathe, and you feel your chest expanding and contracting, and then you sort of imagine that you're breathing the breath directly into your heart. And then after you do that, then you start to feel that, and then you actually start to think of someone you love, something you love to do, your children, your spouse, whatever, your mom, your dad, your dog, you know, the mountains, whatever really just brings you joy and gratitude, and focus on that. And Roseanne, I mean, the gratitude I have for you and everything you do for my family and my patients and the people we work together and children as a whole. It's just, I mean, you're just a force of nature. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom.
I'm happy to be here, and I love you, my friend. And thanks, Dr. Elisa, for posting up and in her busy time, she's offering tech support on her. Another reason to love her. But thank you. I'm going to stay on. Be well, everybody, and try the best you can and forgive and love yourself. It really makes a difference.
Yeah, and such important words, because we are guiding our children in all of our actions, not just in what we tell them to do. So they're actually learning probably more from watching us.
Well said, my friend.
Love you. We'll talk soon.
Love you.
Glad you're here. So everybody, I am super excited to introduce our next guest. Try to get Nicole Perkins on here.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, how are you, Nicole?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so great. This is just so amazing to me because like Dr. Elisa is hooking us up with tech support. She hooked you and I up because everyone, one of the things that I thought was so important was we're at home all together. We're trying to learn to help our kids go through school and their free time if they're on vacation. And then also, like, you know, we're in this spot where, you know, we have to kind of do the homeschool thing and work and everything. But what about if our kids have pre-existing sort of executive function issues, ADHD, mental health challenges? One, I just want to give you the tools to help change this for your child overall, but especially what happens in this heightened, you know, situation right now with COVID-19. And so I thought, Nicole, you would be amazing to help us with this one. So thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
So what is the learning and behavior detective doing? Like, what's going on?
It's been a busy few weeks, I think, for all of us, right? Yeah, certainly the world's kind of turned upside down, but you know, how I really am looking at it, both for myself and my own family. I have 4 kids. My kids are teenagers and young adults now, but I have 4 kids myself, but also with all the families I work with at the clinic, I'm really looking at this as an opportunity. And I think that anytime we have any kind of crisis or challenge that we encounter, there is the opportunity for growth. There are silver linings and good things that come from it. And I think that's really a helpful way to view this. And so I'm trying to help people reframe that a bit, not that it takes away from the struggle and the challenge right now, but we can keep an eye out for how can this be bringing good things to us. And I actually think for our kids who have neurodevelopmental disorders, things like autism, ADHD, those types of issues, and many of our kids with mental health challenges, that there are a lot of silver linings in this, the slower pace of life, families coming together more and prioritizing what's really important. I think these are things that are really valuable. And this whole period of time offers us an opportunity for a reset that, quite frankly, I think lots of kids and families have been needing for a long time. So that's not to minimize the challenge, but just to say that I think there's a lot of opportunities here too.
Yeah, you know, I've been talking to a lot of different people on, you know, different places, patients, colleagues, even, you know, some interviews where I see lots of silver lining here. I'm not to put aside the fact that this is, they call it a pandemic for a reason, you know, and there's a lot of bad, you know, quote unquote bad things going on. But at the same time, we have this opportunity to just reset our whole lives. Yeah. So one of the questions that we've had popping up in one way or another is like this: what about this ratio of work and free time, and how do you recommend parents help their kids navigate through all of this? Or maybe better said, how do we tell the kids to help their parents navigate through this?
There you go. Because as adults, we're often the ones that are more stressed out and concerned about it, right? I think there's several ways to look at it. The first is for us all to recognize that the kinds of activities that are done in school that we tend to associate as learning or academics are just one way that people and kids can learn things, right? sitting at a desk, doing worksheets, listening to traditional lessons, and then doing assignments. That's one type of learning, but actually learning opportunities exist all around us. And people who have been homeschooling or unschooling or non-traditional schooling or Waldorf schooling or all different kinds of schooling now for a long time recognize that often what's done in traditional K-12 classrooms isn't reflective of what we know is best practice for kids when it comes to learning and education, and certainly isn't reflective of best practice when it comes to what we know kids need who have some learning differences, some executive function challenges, those kinds of things. So that's why I really feel like this gives us an opportunity to reset and go, hey, okay, our kids aren't in these settings that maybe aren't doing them a whole lot of good in some ways now anyway. This gives us an opportunity to look at learning in a broader way and actually explore different ways to help kids learn more, help kids get excited about learning. I'll tell you that I've got families at my clinic who are just really thriving with this right now because the stress of having to get their kids to school every day, of not having the negative notes coming home saying, your kid pinched Susie and your kid refused to do his work and he spent half the day in the principal's office, like that stuff is off the table now. And kids are actually having an opportunity to learn things in new and interesting ways, and they're doing really well. So I understand that can be a different way of thinking about it, but we have to understand that learning is much broader than what happens on academic apps, than what happens in traditional classrooms, and capitalize on all of those real world learning opportunities that we've got in front of us right now.
Well, right. I mean, and like, to me, it's interesting. Back when I was busy getting Lyme disease and babesiosis myself, I was teaching outdoor education. Yeah. And one of the women that I worked for actually was doing a lot of informal education and informal assessment work. And so I got to exposed to this. And as I alluded to earlier, like my understanding is that in a lot of other countries that may have high sort of be further along academically, grade for grade compared to the US, is they teach less topics and they let their children explore through various means to learn. Very much like my daughter goes to Montessori and they do a lot of that, right? So so for her, I mean, giving her a project about how to do fashion design and compare, contrast and all this stuff is great. And then in the end, she ends up with more clothes. But in the US, it's like we're topic heavy and test heavy. And so I do think it's that different way of thinking about it.
Absolutely. And, some of the things that I'm talking to parents about are, okay, if your child's really resistive to sitting down and doing the computer work or the worksheets or the packets or the things that have been sent home from school, I don't want parents getting into power struggles and having those battles. What I do want parents thinking about is how can I help strengthen my child's skill development here? So let's take, reading or reading comprehension as an example. If you make a recipe together, there's reading and reading comprehension in that. If you play a game together, there's reading and reading comprehension. Math is worked into cooking to, find the loose change around the house and roll the coins and count that. Writing, write a letter to grandma, or, write this grocery list for me. There's so many ways that we can work those academic skills into real world things that are going on around us. And I think one of the important things for kids, especially with neurodevelopmental disorders right now, is often the pace of school happens at a rate that is far faster than what they can really take in and make sense of. And so we have an opportunity right now as families to pull back on that, to say the pace of life is slowed down. They're able to process better, to give them fewer, more meaningful things to do. I'm all about quality over quantity. Kind of like Roseanne was saying earlier, you can get the equivalent of a 6-day or a 6-hour school day into 1 to 2 hours of one-on-one time. So, the quality of it, what are we actually having kids do? What's meaningful? I'd rather have a kiddo, explore something of interest to them, build something cool with their Connect set, write a letter to somebody, research something online that's interesting, read a book, and then, tell me what their favorite part was. I'd much rather those kinds of things than them checking the boxes of here's all the things in the packet of work that we got done today.
Yeah.
So I just really want to encourage parents to think outside the box with that and to think about what's going to be meaningful and important for your child, and to go ahead and go with that, even if that's outside the box of maybe, what the school is sending or what other families are doing. Do what's right for your child.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that. It's like, I think I do these things because like I want to learn more, and I also want to be like, feel like, okay, so Dr. Niccole, now I need you to diagnose me, because what I'm reflecting on is like when I was younger in school, I was like super ADHD, but if you gave me a project I was interested in, I was great. And I could get the grades, obviously. I mean, it was like medical school, the beginning was kind of like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Then you put me in the clinic. I loved working with people. So I think that my experience and what I hear you saying is that when you let your kids do something that they love and they dive into, then that really just uplifts them, and then they learn more. So it is that quality learning, because then once you love it, then you can apply it to anything. But if you can't learn it to begin with.
Well, and if you are motivated with it and interested in it, what we know is that a lot of how we structure traditional K-12 education in this country is not compatible with how many kids learn. And, we can get into hours-long conversations about all the developmentally inappropriate things we do and what the research shows about how many kids end up getting a diagnosis of things like ADHD and those types of issues simply because they are younger in their class, because we've decided that we need to start teaching reading now at 3 and 4 years old, because we make 5-year-olds go to kindergarten all day long and sit at a desk, all of those kinds of things that are just not supportive of brain development. And that can lead kids to look like they have a lot of challenges and problems, when in actuality, it's a mismatch between where they are developmentally and what the environment is. So I think that there's a lot of kids, while there may be more anxiety and stress right now with things being so different and not having their normal routines, at the same time, there's a lot of kids who are really getting excited about learning and things in a way that they weren't when they were, going to their typical school. So again, we look for the opportunities with it. And I think the biggest thing is parents feeling like they have permission to do some things differently. I used to be a teacher back before I was a psychologist, a long time ago. And I still have many friends and colleagues in the school systems. And, what they're saying is, look, we're sending this stuff home because we're being told we have to. We don't expect families to sit down and do all, it's totally okay with us if kids are engaged with other meaningful things. And so I think just to help parents relax a little bit about it, and to realize that if you're trying to work from home right now and you're beating yourself up over, oh my gosh, I'm not, making sure my kid is on academic apps or, doing these academic tasks all day long during the school day, it's okay. It's okay. The main thing is we want kids engaged in real life and meaningful things. And that includes things like helping to prepare their meals, doing chores around the house, going outside and moving and playing and riding their bike, playing games, spending time with their friends online. All of those things are meaningful real life activities that provide opportunities for growth and learning and development. And so as long as we're engaging our kids and giving them opportunities, that's really what we're after here.
Yeah, we had this conversation last night about getting kids into the kitchen, and I think that it's so amazing that like we think our kids aren't going to be interested in doing it because we assume they weren't. So we never gave them the opportunity to show us they were. And then, so now we're in a situation where they've built maybe up some habits, but if we invite them in and let them do a part of it and figure out where they're interested, you can really start to reinvigorate your relationship with food, with, family time at dinner, reading, right, whatever it is, but getting creative.
I think you had my good friend Katie Kimball on last night, right? And she
I
probably talked a lot
did.
about that. Katie lives in the same town as me. We
For
happen
real?
to live. Yeah, I know, small world. So Katie's awesome. And what we talk about, and there's been research on this actually in the last couple of years, that having cooking skills, having skills in the kitchen is actually a protective factor for mental health as kids move into young adulthood.
Nice.
And I see this all the time because a good portion of my caseload at my clinic at this point is teens and young adults. And the number of young adults who come in with absolutely zero cooking skills, and where that starts to impact them is now they can't cook for themselves. They're eating a really unhealthy diet, and that leads to problems with mental health and all of those issues.
Right.
And so what we see in the research is that even when kids and teens develop basic cooking skills, they grow into young adulthood able to have healthier diets because they're able to cook for themselves, and that helps to reduce their susceptibility to things like anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. So getting our kids in the kitchen, super valuable.
Well, right. And then if you think about what being able to make a food that's real food, we know that it's interesting that there's so much talk about the ACE receptors and everything.
Right.
Right, the ACE2 receptor,
Yeah.
and there's like, should it be lower, should it be higher? But right now, what we're finding is higher levels of ACE2, there's research actually is able to support the immune system against the original SARS-CoV virus,
Right.
or SARS classic, and we think against this SARS-CoV-2 virus that leads to COVID-19. And the two things that are shown to bump up ACE2 levels that are the easiest, the simplest, and the freest to get are exercise regularly and eating real food.
That's right.
Like plant-based diet. And you're just like, this is incredible. Because now we also know that if we feed our microbiome, our gut bacteria, good foods, that's going to positively impact our mood and also positively affect our immune system. And our mood being balanced is going to positively affect our immune system. Because I know a lot of people have been asking, like, how can I help to support my immune system and keep my kids healthy? It's like, well, part of it's the mental health, big time.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because now we are in a situation where as parents, we have full control over what our kids are eating.
Right?
And a lot of
when
times,
has it ever happened?
No, and we all of us are real good at coming up with all kinds of reasons, aka excuses for why we don't do things for ourselves, for our kids, right? Well, a lot of those have been stripped away now, and we're having to face the hard reality that, is it really that I don't have time? No, it's just kind of that I'm not doing it. Is it really that, am I really not working on this stuff with my kids because, they eat whatever they eat at school, I don't have control? Well, now those things have been stripped away, and this is a great opportunity to just start exposing kids to things. Even the pickiest eaters, if we expose them to helping us in the kitchen, just exposing them to being around foods, produce, things, even if they're not eating it, that's a great opportunity to get them acclimated to it. So again, going back to just all of the silver linings and the opportunities here for supporting kids' growth and development, even though they're not in school.
What's really awesome is you and Katie obviously work together, and I see that she just hopped in and is commenting. So definitely everybody pull up the chat and check out Katie's comment.
Hi, Katie.
But one of the things I was going to say a second ago is last night I hesitated because Katie and I were talking about younger kids and everything. But I'm just like, if I think about our young adults, like our teenagers going into college age men, I'm like, boy, I would hope that the boys and men would like to learn how to cook, because that was one of the things that impressed my wife so much, is that I actually knew how to cook.
That's right.
So there's a couple questions. And it's like, can we talk about, what unschooling is and how it might work if you have a learning disabled or a PANS kid who really isn't interested in learning or really doing anything? Are there any tips?
Yeah, first of all, I've yet to meet a kid who's not interested in doing anything. Often what it is they're not interested in doing the things that we think are important, which is an important distinction. But I think we start where they're at. Sometimes that's even with looking into more information about video games or hacks for games or things. And I'm certainly not suggesting we have kids spend all of their time on gaming and those kinds of things. But sometimes we have to dig a little bit to find what they might be interested in. Sometimes we need to expose them to things too, even if they don't have an interest or they think they don't have an interest. And with a lot of these kids, that's more about anxiety or fear of something different, something they don't know that they're already good at. That's a big issue for a lot of kids with these challenges. If I don't already feel comfortable with it and know that I can do it well, I'm not going to want to engage in it. So one of the great starter strategies for that is for us just to do things in their presence to start to acclimate them to that. And for some of the most resistive, behaviorally challenging kids that I work with, you don't start with trying to get them to do anything. In fact, that almost always backfires. What we start with is modeling, and we start with engaging in things in front of them in their presence. I'm going to sit here and read this book. You don't have to read it with me, but I'm just going to sit here and read it. Or, they might be playing their game or whatever at the counter. I'm just going to start cooking. Maybe I'll talk to myself a little bit about what I'm doing, to give the benefit of them hearing that. But with the most resistive kids, we start with those kinds of ways of exposing them to new and different things and opportunities without demanding that they join us or engage with us. And that builds a comfort level. It starts reducing that anxiety. And before you know it, they start to watch a little bit more, they start to join with, and then you can move from there.
Well, I think also one of the things that hit me as you were sharing all this stuff is that a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this and I've caught myself, is my daughter is interested in doing something with me, but it's different than what I want to do.
Yeah.
So sometimes I might have to do something that maybe isn't the thing I really want to do right now to engage with my child to help them come back around, and and then kind of like throwing them a bone, and participating in their life, and then bringing them over to participate in the other side, which is the things we were talking about getting to do.
Absolutely. Meeting them halfway and saying there's some things that you need to do that you don't want to do, but I'm also willing to do some things you want to do. And especially now we're all together 24 hours a day, sort of that compromise and that communicating about those things and meeting halfway becomes more important than ever before.
Yeah. So as a reminder, everybody, all of the talks from yesterday, today, and tomorrow are going to be posted. You'll get a replay link. Because there's a couple of questions, and I don't know, somebody asked if we can get all the chat and post it. I don't know if we can, but I know that we're going to get the resources that are posted in the chat, and those will be available on the replay pages under each speaker. So we're going to make sure you have plenty of resources. So if you miss any of the ones we talk about, I hope we get all of them for you, and we'll probably be giving you a lot more than you're getting. And I did post Katie's resource from last night. So Niccole, there was a question, and I think this one, a lot of people are probably, have the potential of running into this. But if we have like a 15-year-old, who's really into computers, including programming, so not just playing around, but actually doing, some productive work, they'll do some chores, they help with the pet care, but then they're kind of like, now they're getting more hooked on the devices than prior to getting stuck here. Like as a parent, how should I start to think about maybe helping with that?
Yeah, what we know is most effective at this point, because technology is such a part of our lives, our kids' lives, especially now, but even with, when they're in school, spending so much time on devices as part of that. Gone are the days where we think about things in terms of time limits, right? Back, 10 years ago, the advice was, no more than 2 hours a day. Okay, that went out the window a long time ago. Kids come home from school having spent more than 2 hours on their devices. So a more effective way to think about it is to make sure that time on technology, time on devices is not displacing all of the other important and valuable things that need to happen, because we're finding that is really, this idea of displacement is really what's problematic with excessive screen time. It's not how much time is spent so much as it is the activities and the learning opportunities that kids are missing out on the longer they spend on devices. So when we think about it that way, it kind of frees us up to not have to be so panicked about, oh my gosh, how many minutes or hours has my 15-year-old spent on their computer today? And it helps us to think about, has my child engaged in and done all of the things that we've decided as parents or as a family are priorities to engage in during the day? So I can speak to my own experience. I have a 13, 16, 18, and 20-year-old at home right now. So I live all of this. And as a family, we've decided that the values for us are that the kids need to engage in some exercise or movement every day. They need to be doing something personal development wise every day. They have their chores and their things that they need to participate in to contribute to the family. Right now, they have their learning and school activities that they need to get done. So we've got these things that we've identified are core values, are things that are priorities. Now, as long as those things are getting accomplished, the rest of the time, they spend how they're going to spend that, whether that's on devices, doing other activities or whatever. But we know that they have gotten in the priorities. A priority for us is sitting down and having meals device free. That's a priority for us. So when you think about it that way, it frees us up to not be so hyper focused and maybe hyper vigilant and nagging at them about, how many minutes have you been on there? What are you doing? But it helps us to focus more on what else have you done? Have you gotten all of these priorities done? Are these getting fit into your day? And then it frees us up to not worry about the rest of it.
It's brilliant. And I love the fact that you added, personal development time. And it's a really nice, it's so important for us to remember. And also I want to remind everybody, this is amazing, right? Right now, like, I can't believe we're having this conversation. We've got, Elisa's been here the whole time. We have, Katie came back and she's watching today. Darren Engels, who'll be with us tomorrow, is here. And it's just like, everybody is I'm just so grateful, and I'm so motivated by everyone. And thank you, Niccole. And what you reminded me of is tomorrow night, we've got a really special guest, Mary Morrissey, coming, which kind of, the fact that, last weekend, I was on the phone with her. I was like, oh my God, I'm talking to Mary Morrissey. And everybody, tomorrow night, you're going to know why I say that. But it's about dream building, and it's not about like pretending reality's not happening. It's how to teach our children to move forward from this place. So, Katie. Yeah, I was like, who's saying that really nice stuff about us?
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, but so I think one of the things, Niccole, I'm taking from everything you're saying to us is it's really about the quality of what we're doing, and of the time together, of the things we need to do, our priorities, and the quality of the opportunity, to really move, to let our kids and our relationship blossom, not so much following sort of the rigid school feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it as an opportunity. Think about how, gosh, this is a chance for me to make some changes. Maybe, we all have things that maybe weren't working great for us in our own lives, weren't working great for our kids, weren't working great as far as school goes. It's almost as if we've been given this blank slate now to say, oh, what would I change? I have the opportunity to make some changes now. And what would I change? And that suddenly reframes that and puts us in a place of feeling a great amount of control and actual, power over this. Like, wow, I've been given this opportunity to make some changes, to experiment with some things, to figure out what might work, to work on some things with our kids that when they do go back to the normal routine of school will make that easier for them, whether it's time management or self-care or organizational skills or whatever. We've got this blank slate now to make what we want of that, to focus on what's most important for us, for our kids, for our families, and to really embrace that opportunity. Again, doesn't take away from the fact that there's challenges right now, but to really view that as an opportunity and to free ourselves up to experiment, to try some things, to figure out what's going to work best, and to have an expectation for ourselves, our kids, our families, that we will come through this actually better off than we were before.
Totally agree. Hey, we've got, I want to be respectful of your time and Dr. Elisa's, but we have a really cool question that I think you'll love and crush. So, and I want to know the answer too. So, see, this is why you do these things, so that you can ask the questions you want to hear. But Joey asked a question about, can you give some ideas of personal development for tweens?
Tweens. Yes, my favorite. I was a middle school teacher back in the day. Yes. So personal development to me with my patients and with my own personal children can mean lots of different things, but I'll give you some examples of some things. It could be reading some books that are motivational, inspirational, that are, helping them to grow in areas that are struggles for them. One of my patients right now, one of the 12-year-olds that I work with, is doing some reading, some researching, some listening to some audios on time management strategies and things, because he's realized that that's something that he really struggles with. There are, older teens who can read the same kinds of adult personal development books that we do. Good old Tony Robbins. Some of those kinds of things can be great, but really it's whatever they're aware of that maybe they struggle with or want to learn more about. Lots of mindfulness, positive psychology kinds of things can be wonderful. So it really needs to be tailored to the kiddo and what they and you as the parent are noticing might be some opportunities for growth there. But that's how I view that. And it can also be taking classes, online things of interest, maybe that are not in a certain academic area, but there's so many wonderful universities and organizations offering classes on everything from, different kinds of painting to art history, to music, to, positive thinking, to all of those kinds of things. And that's a great example of personal development for kids at that age to identify, hey, that's interesting. I don't know anything about that, or I'd kind of like to learn about that, and to delve into that more. So hopefully that gives some ideas.
Yeah, we watched The Secret, and my daughter could not, she's 10 and she couldn't stop. And then the next day she's like, can I make a vision board? Can I make a vision board? So get creative and have fun with it.
Absolutely.
Nicole, thank you so much. This is amazing. I really appreciate all your time and all the knowledge that you shared with us. I hope, we'll get all your links and send them over to everybody with the replay, so that we can get everyone in touch with you if they need to learn more about all your work. And it's such a pleasure, and I'm so grateful to have you with us. And so thank you for joining us, and, to you and your family, stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I'll shut my camera off, but I'll hang out here for a bit.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. So everyone, we're going to bring on our last guest for tonight, my super buddy and amazing mom and holistic pediatrician extraordinaire, the creator of the Everyday Pediatrics program, Dr. Elisa Song. And I think I just need to unmute you. And Elisa, whoop, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yeah.
Okay, great.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm so glad you're able to join us, and everybody's kind of getting back on the healthy track tonight.
Yes, for sure.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it was so great to hear Dr. Niccole and Dr. Rosen, and I did not make it last night, so I need to hear the replay because I want to hear what Katie had to say last night, and of course Terry and Cynthia. So thanks for doing this. This is awesome.
Oh, it's so fun. Thanks for being here, and it's amazing. As soon as you hop on, everybody's so excited to see you, and I know there's been so much love coming to your family with what you've been going through. So why don't you catch us up on things and tell us what this COVID-19 thing means to you?
Well, I thought that I needed to share my story on Facebook and Instagram this morning. I actually wasn't going to, and I thought, you know what, I'm sure it's going to come up tonight.
Right.
So, just to, give everyone a little heads up, but my kids were diagnosed with COVID-19, and, Kenzie has a positive swab, Bodhi negative swab. His antibody tests are pending. But I just posted, if you go to my Facebook or Instagram page, I just posted, I'm going to start doing a series of, COVID-19 lessons learned, with all the things I've learned, not just with the research before the kids got it, but, since then.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is startling. I don't know where you want to start with all this, but you know, with
Dive
that
right
is
in.
startling is, you know, really, I knew about the potential for false negatives, but the number of false negatives with the PCR swab testing is astounding. And I think that, you know, we really as citizens of you know this country, as healthcare providers, we need to really, you know, raise our voices and urge the administration and our higher ups in healthcare to, you know, make the testing more widely available so we know what's accurate. We need accurate tests. We don't just need numbers anymore. Before I was calling for get more people tested. It's not that simple, because we're finding that in the first week of symptoms, maybe 1 in 3 people who are tested who actually have COVID may actually have a false negative test. And then by the second week, that number, maybe 1 in 2 people who actually have COVID test negative. And so we can't base our decisions, you know, on this. And I think the fear in all of this is because we just don't know, right? There's so much unknown. You know, thankfully, Kenzie and Bodhi, they are doing amazingly well. They have bounced
I
back.
love the
They're
bacon
back to-
picture.
yeah, they are back to their amazing, you know, bouncy selves. But Bodhi I did take him to the hospital for oxygen, and for 2 days, actually 1.5 days. I mean, it was very quick, and you know, he literally bounced back overnight. And you know, I can share what I think is the reason. But we need more data. We need accurate testing. We need more information on what therapeutics might be helpful. You know, we can't get rid of this fear if we don't have information. So that's what I'm hoping to share with people.
Yeah, and you know, just some numbers, I think, because it's really important. It's like, I think it's important to talk about numbers, because when we get some of the original work out of China, we're looking at, if you do like if you're taking a sample from deep in the lungs, you have like a 93% accuracy.
Yeah.
And if you cough up a loogie, you've got like 72%. But the nasal swabs that we're doing, 63%, and the throat swabs were 32% accurate.
Well, and that's if you do it correctly, right? Because
Correct.
what they're now recommending, and what they did for Bodhi, was a combined oropharyngeal and nasopharyngeal swab. I mean, it sounds kind of gross, but first they try to get you to cough, right? Because you're trying to get some of that spit or sputum up from your lungs.
From the
and
lower
then
lungs,
before you swallow, they do the swab swirling around for 10 seconds. And then they take that swab and put it way back deep into your nasal passages, where your nose hits the top of your throat, right? Your nasopharynx, and have to swirl that around for 10 seconds. And I mean, if you've tried to do a swab on yourself, I mean, I know I've done swabs on myself. That's 20 seconds of gagging and, you know, feeling like you have to sneeze, and, you know, feeling like, oh my gosh, is this thing going to go up into my brain? And, you know, so the collection, right? The collection methodology is very likely not accurate most of the time.
Right.
So we have the collection, you know, inaccuracies, and then we actually have the reagent testing inaccuracies.
Well,
and
so
Diane just wrote about the blood test. You know, the antibody test may be rolling out, but again, we don't know if these blood tests are going to be accurate, because, you know, what we don't have the studies on is when we look at IgM antibodies, which test for acute or active infection. So most infections, they'll have, you will initially mount an immune response and produce IgM antibodies. So those antibodies go up, and then after a period of time, they go down. And then at some point during your illness, your IgG antibodies go up, and those are what we call our memory antibodies. So they go up and they stay elevated. The problem with COVID-19 is we have no idea exactly when IgM antibodies go up, when IgM antibodies go down, when IgG antibodies go up, and how long they stay elevated for.
Right. And
so,
like,
and Darren, right? Darren Ingalls, Dr. Ingalls will be on tomorrow, and he said, yes, it takes months to validate any test. So we can't rely on that either.
Yeah. And so like some of the tests, and we have to remember here, this is a really important point. The FDA sort of loosened their strict criteria for your PCR testing as well as your antibody testing because of the emergency. But we have tech companies that are specializing in nothing close to infectious diseases, rolling out infectious disease testing. And I'm like, you know, and it's concerning. And, you know, to correct a little of what was said earlier, not by, you know, in one of the comments, is there's only one FDA approved test, right, from Celex. And we don't even know what that means, because the testing that they use is not a standard antibody test. Mm-hmm. So the problem is we are moving things too quickly. So,
Yeah.
but what did it feel like? I mean, because like, I mean, we could talk for, between you, I, and Darren, we could be on all night talking about, vaccine and, rolling it out too quickly, testing and rolling it out too quickly. But as a mom who's got your background, with your kid having to go through these 20 seconds of swabbing minimum, knowing that it's try number 4 and it might not still work. I mean, what's it felt like as your family? I mean,
well, so when, and I will say most people don't have the option even to do the nasal swabs, right?
mhm,
Even, here in the Bay Area, even still, if you don't meet the criteria, high fever, shortness of breath, cough, you're not going to get tested necessarily at the centers. So, I in my office have some swabs available, and I'm not really able to swab patients because I don't have personal protective equipment to keep me or my
right.
staff safe, right? And so we've had these swabs. So, I thought, well, I'll do them on Kenzie, when she started getting sick, and her first swab was negative. So I thought, oh, great. Because when I told her I think she might have COVID-19, because we'd been in quarantine for 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Shelter at home for 3 weeks, and she hadn't had a single exposure to any outside person. So, it was just so strange. And when I told her I thought it could be COVID-19 and she needs to stay in her room, away from all of us until we know for sure. I mean, the tears and just it broke my heart to tell her that. And we didn't do that. I said, look, okay, you can be around, but just cover your cough and we'll just have you sit away at dinner. But, I just, as a mom, could not keep her isolated in her room
Right.
and not be with her, when she's feeling awful. And so then the test came back negative, and we thought, great, right? But then
Yeah.
her fever lasted for 8 days, and her cough lasted for a full 16 days, right? Which is not typical for a common cold. It's not even usual for a flu. And so I immediately thought, okay, that's a false negative. And so, but, for the most part, she was acting fine. She was energetic. We were going for
Right.
walks. She was winded more easily. She would cough a lot more, but I really wasn't that worried about her. And, I upped to some of the vitamins we were doing already. So upped her zinc, upped her C, upped her quercetin, give her a lot of glutathione and Epsom salt baths. And she seemed like she was managing fine. It wasn't until Bodhi started to get sick, he developed a fever, and really bad stomach ache. So for him, his hallmark symptom, his primary symptom was stomach ache. And throughout his entire illness, he complained of stomach ache and headaches. He never complained about shortness of breath, and his cough was not that severe. One tip off that I knew Kenzie very likely COVID-19 was, I'm not suggesting that people run out and get a pulse oximeter, but I, as a pediatrician, right,
Happen to
have the
have one at home
luxury
like
of,
I
I
do.
have one in my office. So I brought it home, and one time I thought, let me just check. And she was surprisingly, her oxygen saturation was 91%, 92% on room air, which is lower than normal. It's not expected. And we're hearing about these patients presenting in the ERs with COVID-19 who don't look to be in very significant distress, but their oxygen levels are very low. And so, then I knew, that's when I knew in my heart. And then when Bodhi started to get sick, he had a fever and stomach ache and headache. And we know that there are a good number of people presenting with abdominal pain, with COVID-19. But what made me be anxious about him was reading the reports that people who present with the abdominal GI symptoms
Yeah.
seem like they have worse outcomes. So immediately, right, too much information, right? This is just, we're being on media, looking at the news, reading too much was fueling my anxiety, right? And so I sent a swab again, for him and for Kenzie. I just decided to send it again, and hers came back positive. Bodhi's came back negative, but
Wow.
I knew. And that night, so what's interesting, that night, the first night of his fever, he had the most scary visual and auditory hallucinations. He kept saying he was hearing all of these mean voices saying really bad words. He has a wall in front of him that has mirrored stars on it. He said he kept seeing the wall moving closer and further. And yes, fever can give hallucinations, but he's had fevers before and that's never happened. And as I posted this on Instagram and Facebook, I had so many parents direct messaging me saying that their kids out of the blue also had similar, no upper
Right.
respiratory symptoms, but fever and hallucinations. And could that be it? And I don't know. The neurologist at UCSF, she said she's had 2 other kids, one kid in particular who presented last month with these auditory and visual hallucinations and fever, and they did a COVID swab, which was negative. But now in retrospect, hearing Bodhi's case, and because he's so suspiciously in COVID-19, all the doctors in the hospital did not believe his negative test and sent out antibody tests. So they're gonna, do antibody tests on this other kid. But
Right.
I'm really praying that antibody tests are accurate. So we'll just have to see, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple questions about the testing, and I just want to just hit on them because there's something super important, I think, to talk about. Is the testing that's being done in South Korea is very similar to what we're doing. Tons of different companies are using the same technology. But the thing is, every test is different. Somebody asked about IGeneX. I happen to speak to the lab director, and I know what they're doing to validate it. But again, it's just like, we need to, it's not just that is one company making a really good test. It's the question of whether the testing itself is good. And I think some of the scariness is we're keeping our tests for the sickest people. So we don't know what the other symptoms are, right?
Yes.
And so now one of the things is and I know that you wrote about this on your blog, but about ACE2 receptors and everything in the lungs and the type 2, in the alveoli and everything in the epithelial cells. But one of the other places in the body where ACE2 receptors are so high are in the enterocytes, so in the cells of the gut wall. And so I've heard this similar things, and I've been wondering, is that part of it? Are we, because we're so intense on testing the people in the critical care unit, in the ER, that we're missing how other people are presenting because it's a selection bias. We're so narrow.
Yeah. And then for those people who are presenting with the GI symptoms, it may make more sense to do stool testing, right? Fecal testing. So who knows? But, I'm really glad you brought up the ACE2 point, because you brought that up with Dr. Rosen. And, there's been all of this speculation that vitamin D supplements should not be used because vitamin D can increase ACE2 receptors. But, I had such fears when that was spreading around that people then would not, would lower their likely already low, vitamin D levels by not taking any vitamin D supplements. And, while we really don't know for sure how to treat COVID-19, even we have 4 months of experience, since it was described in China, and we still don't know. But we do know, but there is some evidence, as Dr. Tom pointed out, that perhaps, ACE2 medications, things that enhance ACE2, serum H2, right? Not ACE2 receptors on the cells, but serum ACE2 may actually be beneficial. And so, the speculation was that vitamin D, increases ACE2 and maybe may make COVID-19 worse. But we know that vitamin D can actually reduce your risk of sepsis and is so important for a healthy immune response.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is I was reading some papers, even some that came out in the last couple of days about vitamin D levels being even more strongly linked to decreasing viral replication rates and decreasing inflammation than I had previously thought. But there's this conversation about showing that in lab studies for SARS-CoV-1, the original sort of SARS back in 2003, and even in MERS, that if we increase our serum ACE2 levels, will dramatically reduce the severity of the pneumonia. And then people have been talking about ACE2 exhaustion, meaning we've sort of got, when we go from sort of what people are calling like, stage 1 to stage 2, and having it, just overwhelming the body, going into this more critical state, when you get to where you need to go to the hospital. Have you been reading about that, or what's your feeling about? Because it seemed, it's such a hard thing to answer.
I mean, it's so hard to know because we get, with all the information that's coming out, I mean, most of what we're reading about is theoretical, right? And so, I mean, it's really hard to know. And I think we just have to use our common sense and not go overboard on anything, right? And, take everything, with just an eye towards, well, what are we seeing? We need to get this information out to people who are in the hospitals, in the front lines, and we need to start keeping data, right? We need to start keeping track because we need this information. I know there's some questions on, how on earth do I think that the kids got it? I mean, one thing that the ID doctors at UCSF, what we're speculating is, about a month ago. So it was March 13 was when our schools announced that we would not be returning to school. At that point, it's for a couple of weeks. It was until April 7. And so, Peter, on a couple of days before that day, he developed, this really strange GI symptoms. He had loose stools and a really bad headache. And he did as usual, our normal kind of dosing regimen that we do with our supplements, and he got better in a couple of days. Now, I then developed this intense headache, and I never get headaches.
Right.
So, this intense headache where I actually, was thinking, I don't usually take ibuprofen or Tylenol. I was thinking, should I do it? Because my head was just pounding, sore throat. I felt, really terrible. I was convinced I had a fever, but every time I checked, I didn't. And then it went away after 4 days. So we're thinking that perhaps Peter and I actually had it and, then incubated, and Kenzie's timeline would fit with that, kind of, 2 to 14 day incubation period that we're presuming with COVID-19. So I don't know. I mean, if as soon as accurate antibody tests are available, I'm certainly going to be checking.
Right.
One thing that I do want to really also make sure people understand is, with all of the different supplements that are being recommended, high dose vitamin C, nebulized glutathione, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin.
Quercetin, zinc.
Yeah, we just don't know. I do believe, because even Bodhi, who, we brought to the hospital, and he, needed oxygen for about a day and a half. His turnaround was so remarkable. And let me tell you, okay, do as I say, not as I do, right? As a doctor, I had the pulse ox, right? So I could monitor his oxygen saturations, right? I had all the knowledge and, of not just Dr. Google, but all the research I've been doing. So that was also, you can drive yourself crazy with too much information. And, I, at home, when Bodhi's oxygen levels start to drop, I actually ordered some home oxygen. Why? Because I can, right? Don't do this, right? But I did, because I thought, well, he doesn't look like he's in distress. I'm just treating his numbers, and I just want to, help him get a little rest, right? And, in the meantime, I'm calling my doctor friends, and I'm, talking to my sister who's a doctor in New Jersey, and they're right in the thick of things. And I find, and, his oxygen saturation was 88%, 89%. And I brought him to the ER, and we hospitalized him. Literally within hours of being in the hospital, not hours, I would say overnight. That first night, they did nothing but give him the same oxygen I was doing, but he turned around. His oxygen, he dropped from 2 liters to half a liter. And I'm going to tell you what I think really made the biggest difference was not any of the supplements that I gave him at that moment. Although I will tell you 2 supplements that I added that I do think helped. But, it was the fear, right? The fear that was lifted off of me, right? That he was going to crash on day 8 or 9, like we read about in the papers, right? Because he was at day 8, right? The fear that I was, going to bring him and he was going to have this horrible outcome, the fear that the kids would never see each other again. Just this overwhelming fear, right? And when I got there and someone else could monitor him, I just felt this, wave of relief that, that someone else was watching him, that he would be okay, that he would have the help he needed. And that reduced his anxiety so significantly. And I could see it, right? Because when I would start to get worked up and anxious, he immediately would get anxious, and I could watch his oxygen saturations drop 3-4 points. When we could sit together, do our diaphragmatic breathing, open up the app, Stop, Breathe, Think is the app that we use, and do square breathing. We repeated our healing mantras. We repeated, my body is strong, my lungs are strong, I'm getting better and better every day. And literally within, a minute, we would see his oxygen levels rise and go up 4 points in that minute. So we cannot, Dr. Rosen and Dr. Niccole have spoken about, the importance of mindfulness and meditation. It's not just to be relaxed. It really is to help our lungs open up, to reduce inflammation, and to get us better faster. And my heart goes out to the adults who are not able to have a friend or a family member with them, who are, suffering with anxiety on their own. I'm sure that's making things worse for them. And so, if we can even, no matter what we do to stay connected is so important. But I think that was probably the number one thing that really helped Bodhi turn around so quickly, because there's no explanation for why he turned around that quickly. The other 2 things that I did, I started him on melatonin that night because I wanted him to get a good night's sleep. And I started something called SPM Active, which I know we've spoken about for our kids with PANS and Pandas, but there's some questions on what might be helpful for our kids with PANS and Pandas. But SPM is something called Specialized Pro-Resolving Mediators. Again, I do not want you running out and getting this. This is all speculative, but we know that SPMs are natural substances in our bodies produced by our immune system that help modulate and regulate inflammation. And so inflammation initially when our kids are sick is not a bad thing. Inflammation when we're sick, the fever, the body aches, the sore throat, those are ways that our immune system is trying to fight the infection, right, to deal with it. But at a certain point in COVID-19, for some people, that inflammation goes unchecked and not regulated. And so we want to figure out ways that we can regulate and normalize that immune response. When inflammation's done its job, how do we reduce inflammation? How do we maintain the homeostasis, the equilibrium, so we don't get that cytokine storm, right? And specialized pro-resolving mediators theoretically can do that. And so for my PANS patients, that is something that I talk about with them.
Right. Now, guys, there's so many questions about what we should do in specific situations, and these are all super important, but a lot of the questions about the supplements, I want to refer you guys to, and I'll make sure that I grab the link from you, Elisa, but you have an amazing handout on how to get all of these supplements from food, like basically these micronutrients from real food.
Absolutely.
It's very hard to OD on food, and you can do it here. The things are like, we can rattle off all kinds of cool sounding stuff like melatonin and nitric oxide, which you can change with breathing, and beets, and vitamin C, ascorbic acid to decrease inflammasomes, and all this other stuff. But the bottom line is these are all things that come out of food, right? And I think it's
true.
Yeah, and your handout is so good. So we'll make sure that we send that out with the replay, the link to get that. It's so critical.
This is really critical, guys, listening. I mean, food really is medicine. And, despite our best efforts, sometimes it won't be enough. But it lays the groundwork for really, if you do get sick, because really and truly, and I don't say this to scare people, but estimates are that by the time this whole thing is over, up to 70% of us may have contracted COVID-19.
Which is like the flu, right? That's okay.
Yeah. So we want to be so resilient and strong in our immune system that even if we do get it, we will go through with minimal complications, right? That is the goal. And having that foundation of food, learning to cook with your kids, and teaching them this is where the opportunity comes in that Dr. Niccole mentioned, teaching them, well, why are we having this kale tonight? It has so much glutathione in it that's going to help support our immune systems. So, this is where we have the opportunity to teach kids, not just, why, not just to say, oh, eat our healthy foods to keep our immune systems healthy, but why are we choosing certain foods and the power of nutrients? Really important. The other thing I want to mention, Dr. Rosen put in the link for the blog.
Thanks, Rosen.
Because the nutrients that I mentioned that I do believe are so important right now are quercetin, vitamin C, glutathione, vitamin D, probiotics, and omega-3 essential fatty acids. And these are all things we can get from food. So please remember that. And I just highlighted had a question about, did you give ibuprofen or Tylenol for fever reduction? And I do want to actually point that out too.
That's where I'm going too. That's a big one.
Because, when I was in the ER, they're asking me about Bodhi's fever. And I told them, well, it was just low grade for the past few days. And they asked, well, was that on Tylenol or ibuprofen? And I said, well, I haven't actually given him any fever reducers, period, like this whole time, right? Even Kenzie, when she was 103.1 that first night, I didn't give any fever reducers, right? I didn't give Tylenol or Motrin. When we got to the hospital room, the nurse, there was a standing order to give Bodhi Tylenol, because his temperature at that point was, it wasn't even very high. I think it was 99.8. And I said, well, can I actually decline that, knowing that I could, right? But I said, well,
nice.
I actually don't think he needs it because he's comfortable right now. And the fever doesn't seem to be bothering him. And she kind of looked shocked and she said, okay, you really don't want it? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'll ask for it later if I do.
Right.
But, I mean, the fever, again, we have to remember fever is our body's natural response to fighting infections and fighting, injury. And, fever phobia is rampant. And there are some studies showing that if we artificially reduce fevers, especially with something like acetaminophen or Tylenol, which also depletes glutathione,
Yeah.
that may actually prolong the duration of your illness. And they found, with the flu, that it can prolong the duration of shedding of the flu virus from your nose. So what does that mean? I mean, you feel sicker for longer and you're actually contagious for longer. Now, we don't have that same evidence with COVID-19, but
what it's interesting. I want to interject something because it goes back to what you're saying before is we originally were saying when you're asymptomatic from COVID-19, you're good to go. But
yes,
even the earliest research is showing 1 to 4 weeks after you're asymptomatic, you recover, you can actually still be shedding virus. So then when I hear your family story, because Jill and I we're pretty sure we had it in early February and Talia wasn't sick. But from the fever perspective, I remember last fall, our daughter Talia had acute babesiosis and she had 2 weeks of fever and she never went below like 101. I mean, 101 up to 105. And we would only give her some ibuprofen when she was uncomfortable. So the two questions I think would be really helpful for people because I know you've sort of touched on it, but when would you use a fever reducer if you would at all? And then if so, which one might you consider, in COVID-19?
Okay, so such great questions. I actually have an ebook that I'll put the link to in case anybody wants it. It was the first book I wrote.
I think we all want it.
I mean, it's just a really short ebook, but it was the very first one I'd ever written about fever, right? The top mistakes parents make when kids have a fever and what you can do instead. And the reason I wrote this was because of the fact that fever phobia is such a problem. And it's not just among parents, right? It's among practitioners too. I mean, the first thing that happens if you go to urgent care, the ER, when your kid has a fever, even before anyone looks at your kid or lays hands on your kids, is your kid will get a dose of Tylenol. And, we need to really move away from that. And so, okay, so I just put in the link to the ebook there. And
so I got to tell you a quick story because I want to see if you did the same thing. When I was a resident, I would not write standing orders for Tylenol or ibuprofen.
Yeah.
And I would get woken up all night long. And somebody would ask me, they'd be like, so-and-so in room number 3, has a fever. I'm like, well, how are they feeling? And they're like, well, they're sleeping. I'm like, well, then why am I not sleeping? But it's just like, we're so ingrained to treat a number and rather than the person in front of us. So
yes.
Yeah.
That's so true in everything, even for us as integrative functional medicine doctors, it's so important to look at your patient, not just look at the labs, right? Really, really important. But okay, so the question, when might I give a fever reducer? Well, I would typically recommend giving a fever reducer if your child is so uncomfortable that they can't fall asleep, because we know the power of sleep to heal. Or if they're so uncomfortable that they just don't want to drink, because dehydration makes everything worse, right? But you don't have to necessarily get your kids' fever down to normal. It's just comfortable enough to sleep and comfortable enough to drink adequately. But that being said, I mean, there's so many, from an integrative natural medicine standpoint, there's so many great, homeopathic remedies, acupressure points that I teach parents, essential oils, different herbs that can be really beneficial in not suppressing the fever, right? We don't want to suppress the fever. What we want to do is help your child's immune system compress the time until they get well, right? So they get better faster, but we're using your body's natural reserves. And so there are a lot, and that's what I do. I mean, that's what I teach in the course you mentioned, the Everyday Holistic Pediatrics courses, right. Give parents those tools, but in the ebook, you'll have some tools, right?
Well, in your blog, don't you talk about with the ibuprofen when you talk about that, and
yes.
ACE too, you talk about the acupressure points.
Yeah. So, the acupressure point, one of the acupressure points that's so powerful when our kids are sick and have fevers is large intestine 4. Okay. So this is the point here in the web space between your thumb and your index finger. that kind of meaty, fleshy part, right? You just massage and rub, really vigorously. If your kids have a fever and if they're sick, if any of you guys have had acupuncture, you know that some of the points that you really need the most are often the most tender. And so this point might be tender, but you want to massage, and better yet, you can use essential oils on those acupressure points as you're massaging. So the safest one to give for kids is lavender. And lavender, for the most part, can be used what we call
to calm the parents down.
Yeah, well, that too, right? That too. I mean, like I said, you can't underscore the power of reducing your anxiety as a parent to reduce your child's anxiety and help them get better faster, right? Especially for moms. I mean, I'm not discounting the dads out there, but the bond between the mother and child, right? I mean, there's nothing like it. And that your kids will feel, everything, that you're doing. And so, if you're allergic to lavender, there's a question there. Now, I do use peppermint, to cool the body down, but you need to dilute it. And you want to make sure if your kids are very, very little that you just exercise caution with it. But for the most part, it's very safe. So that's one point to use as for fever. And then in terms of which one to use, acetaminophen, which as we pointed out, is also called paracetamol if you're in other parts of the world. I don't know, Americans like to do things differently, right? So acetaminophen,
Well, it was like
Tylenol.
The testing, right? We had to make our own. There were tests available. They were available. They were going to send them to us. No, we'll make our own and screw it up by a whole month.
Yep.
And say we did a good job.
And then there's ibuprofen, right? Yes. Ibuprofen is also the brand name here in the States is Motrin or Advil. It's in a category of medications called NSAID medications, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Now, there was one article was in the Lancet that came out and caused a maelstrom, right? A worry about the use of NSAID medications, ibuprofen, with COVID-19, because again, NSAID medications, like some other medications, was found to increase ACE2. And so then there was concern, as Dr. Tom and I spoke about, that may not necessarily be a bad thing with COVID-19, right? We just don't know. And then the French Minister of Health, posted on his Facebook page. I don't know if he posted or tweeted. I don't do Twitter. I don't know how to tweet. So whichever he did, but that was, I mean, it literally went viral, no pun intended, that, that in France, it seemed that some of the younger people who were having complications from COVID-19 had as a commonality NSAID use, ibuprofen use, right? Now, in looking at looking at this, and I wrote an article just on this, I really think that those concerns were voiced prematurely. So do many, many health organizations. That the recommendation to use Tylenol, I do not think is much better. And in fact, again, Tylenol depletes glutathione, our master antioxidant. Glutathione is so important to protect the lungs, really help reduce the risks of sepsis. So it's hard to say. I mean, my preferred would be to use natural medicines and not use ibuprofen or acetaminophen. I think most would say now, just to err on the complete side of caution, if you're going to use a fever reducer, to use Tylenol. But if you do use acetaminophen, I would say, please do an Epsom salt bath, which will enhance your glutathione levels, and also calm because of the magnesium in the Epsom salts, and also supplement with a little extra glutathione if you have it, and make sure you're getting in a lot of those cruciferous vegetables, right? Your kale, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, all of those yummy, things that are going to enhance your glutathione levels.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the model, I hope, will start to change towards more of a functional model, but we have two things going on. One is we're trying to treat everything with some sort of silver bullet medicine and look for it. And we're also we're jumping every day. I mean, this has been 5-6 weeks, and every day there's a new, it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad. And one day, use chloroquine. Well, the next day they've decided how it's causing the low oxygen, the hypoxemia, or it's treating it. But the problem is that what they decided happens, chloroquine causes as well as fixes. So we're not even thinking. And someone made a comment about how when you're in the moment, your brain kind of gets a bit overwhelmed, and Talia said in the beginning of this, she said, Daddy, everybody needs to remain calm, because when your brain is going crazy, you can't think rationally or scientifically.
Yeah. I want to also point out, just as far as the ibuprofen issue, Sharon writes, I was told to give my son during Motrin during a flare. So this is also another concern that I have, with our Pandas kids. They often, ibuprofen can be a lifeline for them when they're flaring, right? Or naproxen or whatever anti-medication, they're on. And the recommendation now is not to stop your medications. If you're on an NSAID medication, let's say if you have rheumatoid arthritis, not to stop, while if that's something that you need therapeutically. So, I would, definitely confer with your doctor, but the current recommendation is not to stop that.
This is recommendation. This is like one of the few places I've seen agreement. This is like recommendation across every major medical association in the globe that I've seen. I've not seen anyone say, stop your ibuprofen or stop your blood pressure medicines, which are some of the other ones implemented.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the other thing too is, what you were saying about Talia saying, we just all have to calm down. It's so true. I mean, I can say this, I'm laughing now in retrospect. I mean, last week I was not, the fear was, it was nearly paralyzing. What Dr. Rosen said way in the beginning was really, we have to get our brains out of this high alert state. Mm-hmm. Whatever way we can, whatever tools we have, we have when our brains are in the high alert state, our brains do a funny thing. Our brain looks for clues to confirm that we are in danger, mm-hmm. right? That is so important to know about our brains and the psychology of our brains. And so when we are in the high alert state where we feel like we're in danger, that sympathetic fight or flight, we need to actively get our brains out of that state. Not only will it help you feel calm, it's going to help your immune system. It will reduce inflammation. It will increase your lung capacity. So many things that are so beneficial. So, I would really, and I just wanted to show people the heart math that she was talking about.
Right,
some of the things, right? I have it right here, but I'll say Dr. Rosen listed a bunch of amazing apps, Facebook for 5-7-8 breathing, the 360 breathing she was talking about. The app that Bodhi uses for square breathing is called Stop, Breathe, Think. For your older children and teenagers, there's an app called Oak, OAK, like the oak tree, which has some great breathing and mindfulness exercises that are terrific. And then Insight Timer, Dr. Niccole had mentioned Insight Timer, but Insight Timer, it's a free app. And I've told people this before, but every morning I start my morning with a 5-minute breathing meditation by Megan Winkler. Just download the app and search Megan Winkler 5-minute breathing meditation. 5 minutes a day, that's all it takes. And if you set your intention to take that moment before you start your day to have those 5 minutes to breathe, it changes the tone of the entire day. I promise you. The days that I am not able to do that, well, you know what? It's not even not able to, right? Because if we don't feel like we have 5 minutes, right? It's because we don't want to. So on the days where I feel like I'm too busy for it, it changes the day. So this is the heart math smartphone. What do you call it? An app?
Yeah, well, the Inner Balance app is on the phone. Yeah.
So this is the earpiece, right? That you just clip onto your ear, right? And it detects your heart rate. And when you connect it to your phone, it will find automatically something called the Inner Balance app, which is free to download. And the Inner Balance app, what it measures is something called your heart rate variability. And it's just like this, right? It'll find, you just breathe. And when you're in that state where you have good heart rate variability, good coherence, you're in that zone, you're in that parasympathetic state, you'll be able to see a green light here. It's not going for me right now. When you're not in that state, it will be, I have a heart rate, I do. It will be red. And this is such a great way. I've had kids who are nervous to do acupuncture, pull out the heart math Inner Balance app and breathe and get into coherence and be able to do a whole session without a problem, right? It's amazing. So this is something too, because kids need that visual sometimes, right? That immediate feedback. And so this is a way to do it. See, I'm green because I love talking to you, Tom.
So
green. look at that. So, and so when you are in that coherent state, then, when you're in that stress state, you know how to bring yourself back, or you can just focus on your breathing, right? And so it's called Heart Math, as Dr. Tom wrote. You can buy this. I believe it's maybe $120.
Yeah.
But,
So
on their website, there is an Android app, and on their website, they also have free heart math, videos and tutorials to download that anyone can do, even if you don't have this device here.
And I'm glad you said that, and you reminded me. I have a very short ebook called Relax and Reboot, and the first exercise that I'll make sure everybody gets as a gift, because it's so important. And it basically tells you how to do heart math without heart math machine.
Yes.
Because I know that there's a Bluetooth sensor. I think it's 159 or 69 bucks. That's like 149. I bought one literally 15 years ago before they had the phone version, and it still works. I mean, it's just so amazing. And there are cool apps out, like you said. Dr. Rosen, thank you for posting for all the kids. And one of the things that when I was talking, there's a book. If you've ever watched The Secret, there's a speaker by the name of Marcy Shimoff, and she wrote a book, Happy for No Reason. And she was literally just talking about so many of the things you just talked about, Elisa. And it really is about when we're in that fight or flight place, we are looking for the negative, because that's how we survived when we weren't protected like we are these days. So now we really have to extra try to get to that positive place. And we can model that for our kids. And I'm super excited for tomorrow, because we're going to be talking with Dr. Darren Engels, who's been here with us, but also Tracy Gappin, who's a friend of ours from one of our groups. He's an MD who actually himself had COVID-19 and had a pretty good experience with it. I mean, he was pretty sick as well. And I'll tell you, if Jill and I turn out with the antibodies that actually have had it, it was literally, I haven't had a fever in like 30 years, and I was out. It's horrible. It was crazy. So it'll be a really fun discussion. And then talking with Joan Rosenberg and then Mary Morrissey more about how to get through the emotional part and the mindset. It's like, it's so great that like every night, everybody, whether we're a pediatrician or we're an empowerment specialist, we're all kind of talking the same thing. The best way to support ourselves, to support our bodies, to support our children, is to be in the right mindset with love and gratitude.
Yeah. And that is mindfulness and gratitude. That's a muscle that you have to exercise to be able to use it when you need it. Right? We can't just be in the stress state and be able to access that when we're in a fear state if we've never done it before. So please, I encourage you, do this with your family, your kids, make it a bedtime routine. Bodhi, when he was feeding off of my anxiety, we were able to pull out square breathing and do it because he had done it before. He knew how to do it, right? As opposed to being in this fearful place where he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know what it was, and, pushing away the app, right? So we were able to do that together. And, in terms of heart rate variability, I shared this the last time too, but the other thing that really helped Bodhi and I to be in this place where we could just calm and heal was really repeating this loving kindness, gratitude meditation, right? That we do together. And we did it together, and I had him do it with me, when he was feeling really stressed. And it's just 4 sentences. And the first part is, we give loving kindness to ourselves. We repeat those 4 sentences to ourselves. Then we envision our family and our friends, and we extend that loving kindness to them. And then we envision our neighbors, our community, the frontline workers, whomever we want to. We think about the world and extend that loving kindness to the world. And this was found in studies, and in this one study of colleges, to increase heart rate variability for a sustained, prolonged period. So first, when you give loving kindness to yourself, you tell yourself, may I feel safe, may I feel happy, may I feel healthy, may I live with ease. And then you think about your friends, your family, everyone else in the world, and you repeat to yourself, may we feel safe, may we feel happy, may we feel healthy, may we live with ease. And you can do that to as many people as you want to. You can say, may you feel safe, may you feel happy, may you feel healthy, may you live with ease, to whomever you want to. But the time that we spent, I could visibly see, just even with that gratitude meditation, Bodhi relaxing and his lung capacity improving.
It's really interesting is I'm always trying, I'm sort of very much in the spiritual meditation side of things, but also I want to see the science. And when you look at meditation studies and you look at EFT and combining EFT tapping and meditation, you can actually, in as little as 7 days, see a doubling of salivary IgA levels. So while it's not the be all end all of immune, boosting, that's a pretty significant change. Mm-hmm. That you can, so everybody who's asking all these questions about supplements and dosing, we can make sure you get resources for those. I know a lot of us have posted them, but more importantly is the food we eat, and then breathing literally can, if you do 5 to 10 minutes a day, you can essentially double your immune function in a week. But if we don't start doing it today, 7 days is never going to show up. So we should really pick one of these really cool things that we've experienced and we think is going to work, whether it's the, Roseanne's breathing technique or the Harmeth or the oak or whatever it is, and start doing it, try it out.
Yeah. And please, as Dr. Tom said, so important, just pick one thing or maybe
one
two
and do
things.
it.
You don't have to do all of these. We're not trying to add more stress by having you think, oh my gosh, I have to say my healing mantras and do the belly breathing and do the gratitude meditation. It's not about that. It's about picking one thing, maybe two things that you resonate with and that your kids resonate with, and just doing it consistently. That's what's going to matter the most.
It's so
and
critical.
Not to add on one more thing. I'm not adding one more thing, but Dr. Tom mentioned the tapping. So if you guys don't know what emotional freedom technique is, EFT tapping, there is the app right now. It's the Tapping Solutions app, and Nick Ortner has created free tapping for coronavirus anxiety exercises for kids and for adults. So that's another resource. If tapping kind of calls to you, right? Then do the tapping. But tapping, it sounds. I was skeptical, when
Until
I first
do
learned
it.
Tapping, right? But it makes such a difference, right? Emotional freedom technique or tapping, okay?
So,
and it's called Tapping Solutions is the app.
And as a reminder to everybody, we'll make sure that we get all of these and put them in the notes for the replay, including, I know that there's a great place where I can grab your 4, because I know you did a blog post on it, right? On the 4 in the mantra, but we'll make sure.
Oh yes, I did.
4,
yeah, just on that. Yep, the 4 sentences.
So if you don't want to wait, head over to Dr. Song's, to Elisa's website and grab the, check out her blog for all the information. But we'll make sure we get you links to everything. Because we could talk forever about like the nuances of stuff. I know tomorrow Darren and I are gonna, Dr. Engels and I are gonna talk a little bit more about supplements and stuff that people can use. But again, seriously, I know Dr. Rosen threw up Elisa's post, where you can go get the download. I mean, the food infographic is incredible. And again, we have to just have our children exposed to these foods so they can start seeing what they really like, and use this time like I think everybody said it, but Niccole is really saying that this is a time of silver lining, a time where we can create new habits for ourselves and our families that are going to be lifelong health practices for our kids. And when we were talking last night, Dr. Terry Walls mentioned humans have gone through this over and over and over again, throughout history, pandemics and stuff like this. But the question is, how do we, most of us are going to get through this just fine. How are we going to emerge on the other side? So take the time that we have and implement like 1 or 2 things, like Dr. Elisa was saying and everyone else tonight, and find that thing that really you and your family latch on to, and then go with it and make that a habit. Because 5 minutes a day is so much better than 1 hour every 3 months or every 3 years.
Yeah. And I think, to Dr. Niccole's point, I love that, she really points out the personal development that we should all be doing, even as adults, right? We can all learn a new skill, right? Get Rosetta Stone, learn a new language, whatever it is, right? But it's so important, and we really do need to think about, as Dr. Tom and Dr. Niccole said, life is going to keep happening, and so really taking this opportunity to sit and think for yourself, have your kids sit and think about, really what do we want our lives to look like post-COVID? There will be a post-COVID, right?
Right.
Who do we want to be post-COVID? And take this time right now to really, understand the steps to be that person or live that way, because I do think we have this golden opportunity to understand the power of prevention and food as medicine, and be a healthier society in the long run.
Yeah. Dr. Lisa Song, thank you so much. I mean, the gratitude. I mean, my heart is like erupting with so much happiness and gratitude for all my friends, especially you. And I'm so happy that Bodhi and Kenzie are on the mends. And I really love what you just closed with too, because tomorrow night, guys, Mary Morrissey, if you're not aware, I mean, literally has run 3 different 1-week World Peace Summits on behalf of the Dalai Lama, and has met with Nelson Mandela, and is really going to help us learn how to take these everything we've talked about and even go, a step further, just one more tool from a different perspective, so that we can hear things from a different place and really teach our children and teach ourselves, to create our own futures. And we're going to have all the tools from this entire mini series. So I just so many thanks, Elisa, and to everyone else, Nicole and Roseanne, and I know that Katie and Dr. Darren were here today too, cheering us on. So thanks so much for everything. And everybody, we'll see you again tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock. One of the things I do want to make sure I say for hopefully the 10th or 20th time is you're all going to get the replay mailed to you with all the resources. And it sounds like we've copied the chat, so we'll make sure we get all that to you as well. And lots of resources coming your way. Share with your family and friends. What our goal here is to serve and to share our experiences and our expertise so that we can all get through this together, because it has been challenging. So everyone, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow evening.